Good evening. A routine walkabout in Rochdale turned into the most dramatic and perhaps most damaging moment on the campaign trail for the Prime Minister today. In what he thought was the privacy of his car, Mr Brown described a woman he met as bigoted after she had talked to him about immigration. He had forgotten he was still wearing a microphone. When Mr Brown realised what he had done, he made a detour to the home of Gillian Duffy to apologise. "I am a penitent sinner," he said. Our political editor Tom Bradby reports on the charm offensive that ended up offending one lifelong Labour supporter.
He's a man who occupies the most powerful office in the land and yet sometimes seems determined to view himself as a victim.
With me, how are you getting on?
It all began innocently enough this morning. Gordon Brown, on the stump and mic'd up for the cameras, gets into conversation with a lifelong Labour voter.
Yes.
My family have voted Labour all their life.
Yes, yes.
My father, even when he was in his teens, went to Free Trade Hall to sing the red flag.
Yes.
And now I'm absolutely ashamed of saying I'm Labour.
No, you mustn't be, because what we've done, we've improved the health service, we're financing more police, neighbourhood policing, we're getting better schools, and we're coming through a very, very difficult world recession. You know what my views are. I'm for fairness, for hard-working families. I want to make sure, I've told these guys across there, look, if you commit a crime, you're going to be punished, and you better stop.
Well,
you better stop.
I'm afraid I don't think it's happening in Rochdale.
We've done the bus passes, we've done that free eye test.
How are you going to get us out of all this debt, Gordon?
We've got a deficit reduction plan, cut the debt by half over the next 4 years. 6 months.
You can't say anything about the immigrants because you're saying that but all these Eastern Europeans what are coming in, where are they flocking from?
A million people come from Europe, but a million people, British people, have gone into Europe. You do know there's a lot of British people staying in Europe as well. Good. And it's very nice to see you. Yes. Take care.
But it wasn't. As the Prime Minister got into the car, he forgot that his microphone was still on.
That was a disaster. Well, just... Okay. Should never have put me with that woman. Whose idea was that?
I don't know, I didn't see.
That's Sue, I think. They're just ridiculous.
I'm not sure they'll go with that one.
They will go with it.
What did she say?
Everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman that said she used to be Labour. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't know why Sue pushed her up towards me.
The Sue he spoke of is Sue Nye, his closest, longest serving and most loyal aide. At this stage, Mr Brown does not know that his comments have been recorded. His next appointment is with Jeremy Vine's Radio 2 show.
Someone has just handed me the tape. Let's play it and see if we can hear it.
Should never have put me with that woman. Whose idea was that?
I don't know, I didn't see.
That's Sue, I think. They're just ridiculous.
This is the moment you suspect a proud man wonders if his career is slipping through his fingers.
What did she say?
Everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman that said she used to be Labour. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
That is what you said. Is she not allowed to express her view to you?
Of course she's allowed to express her view, and I was saying that. The problem was that I was dealing with a question that she raised about immigration, and I wasn't given a chance to answer it because we had a whole melee of press around her. But of course I apologise if I've ever said anything that has been offensive, and I would never put myself in a position where I would want to say anything like that about a woman I met.
It was painful to watch.
What did he say?
Well, you might not like this, but he said, "What a disaster. Who got me to talk to that woman? She's a bigot," or words to that effect. And we want to know your response to that.
You're joking.
Because, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Where was I a bigot?
These were his words. So but we wondered whether we can talk to you a bit more about it and just find out your reaction.
Said that, has he?
Well,
I can't believe this, that he's said that. All my life I've been damn well Labour.
By now, the Labour machine was in full damage limitation mode, and the Prime Ministerial cavalcade rolled up to Mrs Duffy's home in Rochdale.
Prime Minister, do you regret calling Mrs Duffy a bigot?
Hello.
You regret what you said.
Half an hour later, a contrite Prime Minister emerged.
If you like, I'm a penitent sinner. Sometimes you say things that you don't mean to say, sometimes you say things by mistake, and sometimes when you say things, you want to correct it very quickly. So I wanted to come here and say to Gillian, I was sorry, to say that I'd made a mistake, but to also say I understood the concerns that she was bringing to me.
Labour officials told me tonight they hoped voters would view this as a rounded narrative, weighing the fulsome apology as well as the original sin. But the real danger lies in a simple fact that the Prime Minister appears to have thought that a lifelong Labour voter who raised immigration as an issue was a bigot. Tom Bradby, ITV News.
Well, the Prime Minister has long been criticised for sometimes struggling to control his temper, for giving way to private anger behind the public face. Lord Mandelson explained what happened today like this. The Prime Minister, he said something he does not believe. Our senior political correspondent Chris Shipp looks at the damage today's personal frustration may have caused Mr Brown.
This evening at Manchester Station, the Prime Minister's campaign stumbled on, but with a microphone pinned to his left lapel.
Hello. How are you? Nice to meet you.
This time he was word perfect.
You're all waiting to get home. Is the train delayed or is it on time? No, they're not too bad. Not too bad, that's great. Thank you very much.
And when he stepped into his car, the microphone was either shut off or mouths were kept shut. A policy the Labour Party are no doubt wishing he'd exercised on the campaign earlier.
Election times always exposes politicians to those sort of accidents which they can't control when they're cocooned in Whitehall and Westminster. And this was an accident waiting to happen. This is the real Gordon Brown, the man of tantrums, the man of hatreds.
Because we've been together for so long, I know he's not a saint. He's messy, he's noisy, he gets up at a terrible hour.
Those closest to the Prime Minister, his wife included, admit a saint he is not. Moody, impatient, paranoid. Allegations there have been many. Ones of bullying staff were among the most recent. Those claims were made by Andrew Rawnsley.
I think on the 1 to 10 scale of Gordon Brown temper explosions, this was actually only a 3 because it didn't involve any swearing or any hitting of the seat upholstery in the back of the car. It was quite mild. That doesn't stop it being very damaging indeed.
Lord Mandelson, if this election was about character, Gordon Brown just lost the campaign today, didn't he?
I don't think this does reflect his character. I know Gordon Brown, I know his character. He would not want to have said something about Mrs Duffy, which he doesn't believe. He doesn't believe it in private, he doesn't believe it in public.
So, Lucy, you were there, you witnessed the whole thing. Mysteriously, it all seemed to start so well for the Prime Minister, didn't it?
Well, the speed at which things moved today was unbelievable. The Prime Minister was just finishing up an event when Mrs Duffy from the pavement started shouting about the debt problem. We all went to talk to her and then she was ushered over to speak to him by the Prime Minister's aides, and she was pretty opinionated, but Mr Brown ironically was actually doing a pretty good job convincing her to vote Labour again. Then that microphone moment, and after it we all piled into Mrs Duffy's kitchen and she was pretty bewildered and shocked. She was getting texts from family and friends. We understand she is now in talks with the papers. The Prime Minister had tried to get out to meet more real voters. He might be wishing he hadn't met this one.
Right, straight back to Tom. And Tom, I suppose the big question is, does this change the game 8 days shy of the election? And if so, to what extent?
Well, Mark, unfortunately for the Labour Party, I think it might change the game. Look, it was agonising watching those exchanges, particularly the moment when Gordon Brown puts his head in his hands. I don't think anyone wants to see a guy destroyed over this, I'm sure, least of all Mrs Duffy. But there are a couple of, and we know Gordon Brown has a temper. If you're watching this programme, I'm sure that won't be a total surprise to you. But there are a couple of things here that are damaging. One in particular. The first is, this is quite a long talked about character trait of Mr Brown, that he tends to view everyone who doesn't agree with him sometimes as a sort of enemy, and that is quite damaging. But much the most damaging aspect of this is that Mrs Duffy is an absolutely core Labour voter, the kind of person who turns out in sun and rain year after year to support the party, the kind of person who they must have turning out for them again this time. Here she was, talking to him, raising the issue of immigration and being accused of something that many people are worried about, don't feel is discussed enough, don't feel the Labour Party's dealt with enough, and here he was calling her effectively a bigot. Now that is very damaging, that's going to play very badly on the doorstep, and it's likely to help the party's political opponents.